By the end of this video, we're going to be turning the key for the first start on this turbo wagon project. So I've made a list of all the things that I can think of that need to be addressed. I'm sure I'm missing many. It looks like a big list, but most of it's not that bad. And then tune part 1. So the way that this car is going to get tuned is that we basically back up the ECU as is. I send it in, then they give me a base map, and we just kind of build and optimize from there. This is a remote tune, which is pretty cool. Every other time I've gotten a car tuned, I had to go to a dyno and they did it, there. So let's go ahead and get the car up in the air and start knocking out some of these items. So this is the first time I'm looking under here along with you, and man, look at how good that looks. It's crazy. So the E46 chassis in general is a relatively hard one to turbo, and a large part of that is because of the clearance that you have here. So you can see how many pie cuts it took to make that downpipe clear the body and then run all the way back out. And he also had to shorten the outlet on the exhaust housing. So that used to be about over here. He cut it and welded it back on, and then of course made that downpipe look like that. Then not only that, but you also have to drill into the exhaust housing right here and then weld the wastegate to it. Sometimes people build pipes and kind of put it out over here, but this is typically the best way to do it if you can weld. I cannot, but obviously I had someone who is very adept do it. Then you can see that the wastegate is recirced back into the exhaust and all the way out, which is beautiful. Then in terms of what else we need to do, I need to get the oil drain fitting on here and connect it to our bung right here. Obviously that's a very short distance, so this is going to be very tricky, and there's not a whole lot of clearance here between the boost side of the compressor and our oil drain. So this is going to be very tricky. So I think the first thing I want to tackle is getting the oil feed line on, because that's going to be fairly difficult. You can see this, the tip of it sticking up there. Then we're also going to get our drain line situated. So to do that, I think I'm going to take off the compressor housing here. All right, so I basically got the whole turbo off. Just the exhaust housing is still attached up in there. And man, that is a massive pain in the booty. But what I wanted to do was go ahead and get the water fittings installed, get the drain tightened up in there, and I figured it'd be a little bit easier if I went ahead and pulled this out of the car. So I got this nice water line kit, as you can see, and this should be fairly straightforward to get in here. I learned that the water direction doesn't really matter, but there needs to be like a slight uphill slope to the flow, which I found really interesting. So these fittings will basically go, in the turbo like this. They'll go to the lower radiator hose and to the block drain. Then from there, on this end of the hose, the kit comes with a barb fitting. So we just screw that in on this side, and then all you have to do from there is just basically run this barb to the hose that we already talked about. So that's awesome. We also have our oil drain fitting here. This thing is huge, and part of me wants to lop off a little bit of this because this fitting is so big, and it's not going to be under pressure since this is just the oil drain. But it's tough to say because there, as you saw, the distance between the outlet of the turbo oil drain and the actual 45 degree back into the pan is very, very tight. So seems like I might need a shorter barb fitting here. Wow. So it is many hours later, and I've pretty much been at this non-stop, and I'm not even really where I began. This is still off. I'll show you the progress I have made though. It was an absolutely mammoth fight, and it took me so many attempts and so many removals and re-adds. I got the oil drain bung fitted, and then I gotta get the little hose to connect those two, but that's gonna be relatively easy, I would say. Gotta get it on probably the upper bung first and then kind of twist the black one into it. Then I got the coolant lines, these hard metal lines. That was difficult to figure out the order in which they needed to be tightened to fit on there. And then it's really difficult to see, but up there as well, that other hard line, the braided hard line, is the oil feed that's up there and tightened down. And then, man, it took me 2 hours probably just to tighten down the 6 bolts to get the turbine wheel actually attached to the compressor housing. But it is nice and solid on there. All those bolts are on. So the next step is going to be to put the compressor housing back on, get that tightened down, which I'm sure will be equally a fight. And then we will be basically done down here. I hope I never, ever, ever have to take that off. If this turbo goes bad, I'll either pay some money to do it or I'll just sell the whole turbo kit, get rid of it. That was terrible. Okay, so relatively boring, but I got that Vanos plug back on there. All I had to do was just take the manifold off. There's 7 bolts, and then just pop it up enough to get that in. So if I ever need to undo that plug, which I hopefully never will, then the manifold has to come off, which is kind of a pain, but it's really not that bad. And now that means we can mark off another item on the checklist. Making progress. So the next pretty cool thing about this project is there's actually a bunch of different models of kind of things going on here. So the E46 comes with the BMW model engine M54. And what's really cool about this is I now have the M50 manifold from E30s, or maybe E36s, I'm not 100% sure, but M50 manifold for sure, and then the M56 valve cover. And what that allows me to do is completely eliminate the whole PCV system, which simplifies the engine bay a lot. And then what I can do is run from this barb here on the valve cover. I can get all of my extra crankcase gases out to this catch can, and then to pull it out of the catch can, I'll use this exhaust venturi. So this thing is really cool because this will actually thread into the exhaust on a bung that I had the welder put on, and then the outlet end of the catch can here is going to connect to this. So this is not something I've ever done before, but obviously relatively easy setup. You just need kind of a reducer from here to there, and then a line to go from there to the exhaust. Then if we look under the car, you can see that there is the bung right here, and that's where this venturi is going to go into. It actually goes in the pipe like this, and then it's going to pull the crankcase gases out and push it out to the back of the car. Then of course I have another bung where you can see right between those two pipes there. That one's going to be for the wideband sensor. So this car is the later model E46, which means it has the MS45 ECU, and they have the O2 ports in the actual manifold, as you can see. So because I'm running MS45, I have my 2 O2 sensors in the header. The other one is back behind there, and those are actually widebands. But my tuner recommends we have, these are critical for tuning MS45 in the header, but the one in the downpipe will be used to kind of cross-reference and make sure the O2 from up here is in a good state as compared to the downstream downpipe O2 sensor. So some big leaps forward will be had in just a little bit when I get all the stuff to kind of connect, like I said, the valve cover to the catch can, down back to the venturi. Then the other thing is I bought a drill and tap kit for an 8AN fitting. So I'll basically just tap this out because this thread is absolutely tiny. So I'm just gonna run from the barb fitting that I'll tap into here over to my wastegate, and that's exactly what the wastegate recommends. So I've gotten a bunch more Amazon parts so that I could start connecting up the intercooler piping. I got the fittings to go from 2.5 to 3 inch, then from 3 to 3.5 for the mass airflow sensor down there, and everything just barely fits. I kind of thought that I wouldn't be able to fit the headlight back in, but no problemo, just barely. And then also the mass airflow sensor cable right here is basically as stretched as it can be. Not fully taut, but there is no spare slack in that cable. So the cold side intercooler piping is basically done. Well, actually, no, I lied. Unfortunately, I took the headlight out to start tightening these, and I realized that this pipe is not actually connected anymore. So it was working, and I think it's just too tight a fit now that I have the upper pipe in its proper home. So this particular spot right here, I'm gonna need a 3.5 to 3 inch coupler that's just a little bit longer so it can just sit out and then allow this corner bend to pull back a little bit. All right, so a little bit of an update here. I got the catch can set up. So got the valve cover barb with a little bit of a reducer into the inlet on the catch can. I hate the fact that this says oil catch can on the top. And then from there, this goes down to the exhaust venturi. So it runs underneath the car like I described to you guys before, and you can see that pipe there. I need to kind of get it secured somehow, but for the most part, it's okay. And then next up is just finalizing the turbo kind of oil drain situation. It's been really, really challenging. You can see all the tools and the parts and the attempts that have been made to get it hooked up, and it is quite difficult. So hopefully I can knock that out today. And then next up after that is going to be just connecting this other silicone hose that I bought that will go from, you know, this pipe into the MAF right there. And after that, there's only a couple of other small things. So been able to knock off a few more items on the checklist. So once I get the MAF connected, that'll be one of the, you know, kind of critical pieces. The intercooler clamps, that's going to be pretty easy. Brake booster, that's just simply plug it in. Then the other simple things, coolant, power steering, and oil in, oil drain. So really, I mean, there's not that much critical left. I also got the base map from the tuner, so I'll be able to load that on the car here in a little bit. And then from there, I don't think there's anything else that's going to prevent a first start, which is so exciting. I can't wait. I'm so nervous and just so excited at the same time. It's been a long time coming, and I know I'm going to run into other problems and issues. I'm just so excited to turn the key and just see what happens. So the drain line is mostly on. I need to get some hose clamps on this, but man, this took me forever. So many attempts, hours and hours just to get to this point here. This hose is so short, it was posing a pretty steep challenge, but luckily this barb fitting goes all the way up to right here, so I'll be able to get a good hose clamp on that. It's not touching anything, it's close to the wastegate, but you know, the wastegate's not going to be open all the time, so I don't think this will be a significant issue, and then I can put a hose clamp on this easily. So now what I need to do is go ahead and drill the fitting into the turbo so I can connect to the wastegate. Actually, I think it's this lower one is what it connects to right there. Woo! Hey, it's starting to look like a real turbo under there. I got the compressor housing installed, all of the fittings tight for the water line, and you know, just the general compressor housing bolts. So now I need to run the rubber hose for the water lines. And one thing that I thought was really interesting that I thought I might share with you is that the turbo is clocked such that, you know, both the oil and the water lines are like that. And interestingly, you want the cold side of the water to come in from the lower direction into the turbo, and the hot side of the water to be pushed out of the top. So in my case, the radiator lower hose here, I plumbed into up top, and this is the cold side of the radiator. So my plumbing is gonna go from here to this line in the turbo, because this is the lower one, and then this upper one is going to end up going to that block drain, which you can actually see right there, that gold fitting. So pretty interesting. The oil cannot go uphill, but the water can. So I thought that was kind of interesting. All right, so you can see those two black silicone lines right there for the heater hose. I got the turbo connected to the wastegate. These don't have hose clamps on them, so I'll need to find some really small ones, but I don't have those. So we're gonna rock it for now. I was gonna quickly just add that I haven't filmed a lot of the really intricacies under the hood here because honestly, it's been so much time and so much back and forth and just try this, take that off, put this on, that doesn't work, go backwards 2 steps. And there would just be a ton of wasted boring footage. So I just decided to go ahead and knock this stuff out. But now we're gonna make some really significant progress, and within either tonight or maybe tomorrow, within the next 24 hours, we should be able to hit this thing with a first start. So I'm insanely nervous, but also super excited. All right, so the intercooler piping is tightened down in all the spots, all the way up. MAF is on and connected. Right now, the only thing that's missing is I need 2 more 3-inch hose clamps for there. And then after that, I will be basically good to go. So then in terms of other things that would prevent start is obviously our 3 fluids. And then other than that, nothing else on this list will prevent us. Oh, actually we can mark off MAF. All right, fam, so today is the day. We're gonna hit that first start. Last night I went ahead and filled up everything with fluids. I got the oil, coolant, and power steering fluid in. I ended up making a massive mess because I accidentally overfilled the power steering fluid. I was eager, it was dark, and it filled that little reservoir up way faster than I had intended. So what I'm gonna do now is go ahead and disconnect the injectors. So they're just gonna be unplugged, and then also I'll have the coil packs unplugged. That way we can turn the engine over a couple of times to prime it with oil, and then from there we should be able to plug everything back in and fire it up. This is honestly so nerve-wracking, I can hardly describe it. I'm just scared to turn the key. Alrighty. All right, so no new leaks. There's a little bit of stuff there, which is some dripping coolant out of the turbo, but that might be crush washers, and I'm hoping that those just kind of bed in here in a little bit. So not seeing any oil drips. So I'm not seeing anything new at the moment, and the engine does turn over, which is amazing. Very nerve-wracking. Of course, we're not going to see any fuel leaks because the injectors aren't plugged in or firing. I could definitely pull the spark plugs out to make it easier for the engine to turn over. I'm going to go ahead and do that again for another like roughly 10 seconds or so to see if that oil lamp turns off, which should mean that then we have oil pressure. As you can hear, the battery is not super happy with all that, so I'm going to check the voltage on it real quick, and then we'll probably give that a little miss until we're ready later to do it again, and then we can turn it on. Okay, so note for future me that pulling the spark plugs makes essentially no load on the starter, and so I was able to turn the engine over. Took about 4 or 5 attempts of 10 seconds of turning the key to build up the oil pressure enough to make the red oil light on the dash go off, which is a good sign. That means I'm getting full oil pressure and it will be safe to start. And then of course there are no additional leaks except for whatever that is. Is this oil? It sure is oil. Okay, so I got that dried up and it looks like it is seeping out right there at that little crack. So evidently I have a bad oil filter housing cap. That sucks because that is definitely going to prevent us from trying to start it today. Just for the sake of, confirmation, I think I already know the answer here, but I was going to briefly turn the engine over again and just see if it starts seeping out of there again. Dang, sure enough, look at that. That's so disappointing. Okay, so another day has dawned trying to get the BMW running, and went ahead and bought the AEM wideband sensor kit. So I have that along with the sensor that's going to go in the downpipe underneath the car. And then in my case, the wiring is not going to be super difficult. It will definitely be a little bit tricky because I'm going to have to tap into the power source for like the radio or something like that that has a switched 12-volt power. And then the signal wire will go to one of my post-cat O2 sensors, which I don't have anymore. So a little bit of trickery. I've been trying to research all morning long. There's like 3 different harnesses here, and there's only a couple of wires I need, but it just seems like there's a lot to pay attention to at the moment. So I laid this out just to kind of show you guys how this will work. I've never wired in a wideband sensor, so this is all brand new to me, but it's relatively simple. So this is going to go into the downpipe right after the turbo exit. And then of course this connector just joins together. This is a long wire that's going to run into the car. There's a 6-pin connector here, and that actually goes into the back of the gauge, as you can see on the left-hand side there. And then the right-hand side for the other 4 plugs is going to be this connector. And then it's just 4 wires, one of which you don't even have to use. So of course we're going to have power and ground. And then the white wire, I believe, is the actual signal wire, and that's going to go into the post-cat O2 sensor that I had before. And so this is going to send the signal straight to the car's ECU, which can be data logged, and the tune that I got from Chaos Calibrations, they'll be able to read the sensor here. And then of course I'll also have visibility into the air-fuel ratio on the gauge, which is going to be awesome. So then the next part of this equation is where to put the AFR gauge. And a lot of people put them in these little like air vent holders, but as you can see, it's going to block the air vent. And the whole reason why I went with the bottom mount turbo setup was to keep AC. And if basically 1, if not 2, for a boost gauge possibly in the future, if a whole vent is blocked in the summertime here in Florida, that's going to be brutal. So I'm not really a fan of that. I did see somebody that managed to pull this trim piece up and put it right here, which actually looked pretty clean. But unfortunately, when you're right here, you can't see it. You'd have to go like up over the wheel and lean forward to see it. And of course, that's not very ideal. You can't even really see it until you lean all the way over here. So I don't know exactly what I'll do. One thought that I had was I'd never use this whole area down here, like pretty much never use the cigarette lighter. So I wonder, could I fit it down in here or something? Or I don't know. I wondered if I could find somewhere creative. Okay, so it's the next morning, but I am making some progress here. So there is a little rubber grommet down here that actually runs right by the transmission tunnel. And I was actually able to snake the wire for the, from the O2 sensor to the gauge. And then also this other black wire that I ran that comes up from there will be from the old PostCat O2 sensor, which my tuner told me that I can tap into. So I believe it's the white wire here will act as the signal, and then that white wire is just going to get connected to this black one, and then the black one. And then these two harnesses right here were for the PostCat O2 sensors that I just cut. And I simply need to tap into pin number 4, which conveniently is labeled, and it's that yellow one. So that's gonna be really easy. The other end of that wire is just here. And I went this way, ran it down under the engine tunnel and into the cabin that way, because the other option was to go through, like up and over here. Then it would have to go through this thing, then down through there, into those little, that little grommet into the cabin, and then under across the dash. And I wanted this to be as clean as possible. These don't actually reach that far, so that ends about there. So there would be, an extra wire strung down around through there, and I just wanted to try to keep this as clean and sort of out of sight as possible. So I also figured out what power and ground I can tap into for the radio, and then I bought my little tap connectors there. So that should be nice and easy. Then I will do a little test run, just make sure that it actually powers up. Okay, so my entire interior is hanging on by a thread, but everything should be wired in. Got the connectors all situated there, and then the signal wire. So we should see when I turn the key to the accessory position that this lights up. That's exactly what we want. So it is now slightly more put back together than it was, and I have the gauge where it's going to go with the cables routed properly. I'm gonna buy a little 3-gauge pod just on eBay for like 25 bucks, but we can see that it does still click on and is good. Once again, it's another new day. I got the oil filter cap, so all we gotta do is get that on, then we gotta put the spark plugs and the coil packs back in, then we can prime it again and fire it up. Ugh! All right, we're fully primed, so now it's time to get the plugs back in. All right, here we go. This is such a big moment for me. I'm nervous. We're gonna turn the key for real, and it should start. Okay, that feels like progress. Seems like I just need to get the fuel pump kind of primed, fuel back in the lines, and I guess now would be a good time to double check there's no new leaks or anything. I can definitely smell fuel, so let's pop the hood and double check. Oh, I let it go, it was almost there. Oh, it ran on its own for a second. No, I missed it! I missed it! I turned the key and it started! Oh! Well, it didn't last long, but that was the longest it's run so far. Let's try that again, see if I can get it on camera this time. There we go. Oh, come on, the battery's gonna die soon. There it is. Woo, baby! It's alive! Oh, wow. Oh my God, it's loud. It is loud, loud, loud. It's alive for the first time in who knows how long, almost a year. Are we good? Seems like the idle's settling out. That's good news. So I gotta let it get warmed up, and then it needs to idle for like 20 minutes so the rings can set in. So I need to get it up to operating temperature, and then we have to sit there and babysit it between 2 and 3K to get the RPMs to level in. It's not happy right now though. I did have the tuner put the RPM to be plus 300 or plus 400 over stock, so that the flywheel that I have on and the harder engine mount don't vibrate through the car as badly. I'm just gonna keep the camera going in case something crazy happens. Seems like it's trying to figure itself out, but when it goes into that low rev, the engine shakes pretty badly. It's not very happy at that RPM. So hopefully the ECU is just kind of relearning. Oh no! Well, it ran for about a minute. This footage has been going for a minute and a half. This looks like guns blazing. There's a lot of stuff to burn off though, so I'm not really too worried about that smokiness. Let's just double check that everything over here is good. A little bit to see. Oh, it does not like when I accelerate. I just pressed the gas and it died. Well, so I'm thinking that it's probably to do with the gas being old. I've said so many times that this car has been sitting for a while, and I just looked it up. Apparently gas can only last between 3 to 6 months, which really sucks because I did not want to get the car warm like that. And of course, the gas can is empty. So that means I got to rush to the gas station, and then I'll be back. Oh, just me and my gas can going for a ride. This sucks. This is taking forever. All right, so got about 4 and a bit gallons in. So yeah, there we go. We can see that it was, I think, a little bit lower, maybe a little bit above the quarter tank mark. Now we're over half, so that should be enough to give us some good fuel. So let's try. Seems better initially. Let's hope that once that old fuel gets out of the lines and the pump and stuff, that we'll be better off. Fingers crossed. Come on, smooth out, please. It smells slightly like oil. Let's double check everything is still good. Yep. It should be fine. Oh, come on. Okay, so it's many days later, but after some back and forth with the tuner, I got a tune that's a little bit more lean, and we'll see if this works. So we're gonna go for the first start after reflashing that new tune. I don't wanna jinx it, but it's working. Oh my gosh, I filmed this so many times hoping that it would finally run. Of course, the time I don't film, it starts running. Oh, it's been such an ordeal to get to this point. I'm gonna let this run for a little bit, and then I'll update you in a little. Well, it's run the smoothest and longest it's ever run. I think we're making progress, although just went to check for some leaks, and there's some sort of new coolant leak. I can't tell if it's coming out of the top, the cap here, or if it's underneath this hose, like between the expansion tank and the hose. I'm gonna try to dry it up and see if you can tell. It's just like making a dribble. That sucks. This is the first time the car has ever gotten to operating temperature, so I should be able to rev it to 2 to 3K now. Oh, it's loud. She's loud, boys. Oh, it's working. We're officially running and driving, people. I don't want to go too hard because the tune still needs work. But it's working!